Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm so hyped right now. Anything's possible. I'm on mama. I'm on my lady, ma. Anything's possible.
Yeah. Rain and Jay's back with the vengeance. All the real Celtics fans in attendance. This the truth like 34. This like walking in the garden when you hear the roars. The crowd goes crazy. Most in-depth coverage on the daily. Mainly podcast royalty, the content kings. When you talking about the franchise with 17 rings. Focus like Danny at the deadline. Global but it got a local feel like the red line, the blue line, the green line. Play it in between time. I'ma throw my C's jersey on in the meantime and press play. When the F's done, I can't wait until the next day. Trying to stay in tune with the C's, that's the best way. Melly.
Hey there, welcome back to the Locked On Celtics podcast. I want to thank you for making this show part of your daily routine, whatever it is that you're doing, wherever you're going, whether you're listening to this show on your headphones in the car, on a speaker in the shower, whatever it is, if you're listening to the podcast, or if you're watching the show on YouTube, I want to thank you for making this show part of your daily routine. I'm John Karalis. I host this show Monday through Friday. I cover the Boston Celtics for Boston Sports Journal, and I am the author of the Boston Celtics All-Time All-Stars, a book now available at bookstores everywhere and on my website, johnkaralis.com, for $30. $30. Great Father's Day gift. You get a signed copy. I'll personalize it, put whatever message you want on there for dad or for whomever, husband, brother, for yourself. I had someone buy them for a girlfriend. Birthday gift for the girlfriend. $30. Not bad. Today's show is a crossover episode with the Locked On Nets podcast. I got Adam Armbrecht on the show to talk about the upcoming series with the Brooklyn Nets. All right, Adam. So what do you got? Celtics in 5? Is that what I heard the other day?
Is that what the rumors are?
I thought I was I not hearing that properly?
Celtics being in 5 games, including the playing game, I think is probably physically playing in those games might be the case. This is hard, man. I will say, just from a pure basketball fan standpoint, it's weird to talk about the Celtics in a relatively disparaging way when it comes to matchups, because recent history, you got players, the coaching staff, like so many of the same elements are there from very successful, strong, dangerous teams, and yet we do not look at them at all the same way in this particular series.
Right, yeah. And I don't blame you. I was listening to your last podcast, and it was every Celtics fans are doing this. I just recorded a podcast yesterday where, one of us was just like, this is going to be a sweep. It's going to, here's my number one question here for the Celtics is what happened this regular season exactly what's going to apply in this playoff series? Or are we going to get the Celtics that made that Western Conference playoff run that came back against Denver and the team that beat the Clippers twice and the team that has in big games stepped up, whether they've been shorthanded or not? And that's my biggest question, because the Celtics have right now what they haven't had all season long, which is rest and practice time, which no one's had, but the Celtics have, because of their short turnaround, have so desperately needed it that I just wonder what that's going to mean, number one, and like for them, for their own performance. And even if it does impact them, what does that mean for this series overall?
Yeah, it's hard to see, and again, because I like having good series. It was funny when it was lining up, you start thinking about Washington and Boston playing each other, and you thought, well, Washington, for as good as they can be offensively, that's the kind of matchup that you love for the Nets. Yeah, try to run with us. We'll outshoot you. You won't be able to, keep pace. But then as you came down the stretch, Boston, it's because of the injuries. Right? I mean, losing Jaylen Brown being out unto itself, right? Because actually Doug got himself into a little bit of hot water with Twitter and the fan base when he said, listen, if you look at the players on both sides of this matchup, you're going to take Tatum over Kyrie Irving. And it's not a knock on Kyrie Irving, but Jayson Tatum, the position he plays, the skill set, all those things. And it's in that vein of starting a franchise kind of mode.
Sure.
And then they go, he just joined Kyrie Irving, the 9th player to, put up the 50, 40, 90 line and all this stuff. And you go, right, but the impact that Tatum can have on a game, like a 50-point performance against Washington to get into this position is something that's very unique for that skill set, that player, that age, all of those things. The unfortunate part is Tatum could put up 50 points a game against the Nets and they could still lose. Because what did Walker put up? 27, 20, right. So they combine for 79 points to beat Washington. You can combine for 79 points between those two players every game of the series against the Nets and still be losing by 15 points every game. And that's a shame because it means that Boston does not have the pieces to support quality performances like that. And I think we talked about it with Matt Brooks. We look at the bench of Boston, right? Mm-hmm. There is just not enough depth there that when you come out of the starting unit and the Nets can feather Harden into the second unit with some of those guys, who's going to match up and just stretch 7 minutes before you can get Tatum and Walker and those guys back on the floor?
Yeah. Well, it's going to be a lot of Tatum and Walker and those guys on the floor. You're looking at
they're not going to get off the floor.
I mean, Brad Stevens said it the other day. You're going to see a lot of 40 minutes plus for Jayson Tatum. He's going to come out at like TV timeouts, and he's going to get like rest around the quarter breaks. And look, that might be enough where it's a chance for Brooklyn to go on a run. This is the way I look at it. The Celtics still had a big lull in the second quarter against Washington, and they got down 8 and they managed to cut it to 2 at the half. If that happens against Brooklyn, they're going to get down 20 and they're going to hope to manage to cut it to 14 at the half. And that's going to put them behind an 8 ball. And as far as Brooklyn defensively, I know that they've figured out a couple of things but they're still not a great defensive team. You don't have to be a great defensive team. I think if Brooklyn plays defense for like 5 minutes in this game, like that's literally all you need. 5 minutes of Celtics go scoreless for like 3 and you go on a 20-2 run. And that's it, because you're just not catching up against the Brooklyn Nets. Like they just get too many weapons. So,
and we had talked about this, right? That I think you're right. The Nets, it's all you need is 4 or 5 really good defensive possessions. That's the key here. Can you get a couple of key stops when you need them? There's a couple of things. One, on the Tatum piece, I wanted to ask you is, I mean, how disappointing is it that he had to deal with COVID? And I mean, I know that was a storyline all year long, and rightfully so. It drained him, and it just took him so long to get back. Now, maybe they'll benefit of the gap between these, right? 2 days off in between each of the first 3 games in this series. So certainly he should be as healthy as he could be. But coming into this year off of last year's performance for him, this was MVP. This is upper echelon player about to take the next big leap. And it feels like it's been kicked back 6 months for him, or half a season for him.
That's the thing. And a lot of people, I didn't hear Kendrick Perkins say it, but I saw the tweets about, he's tired of the excuses for the Celtics and blah, blah, blah. And, there's a percentage of people who say that that's all this is an excuse. But a lot of teams have gone through COVID and these health and safety protocols that took a lot of players out. But how many have had them with their main guy? And Tatum, with not just missing the time, there's really 3 things that happen. First, Tatum gets COVID and misses a bunch of time. Second, a bunch of games get postponed, but rescheduled within that month of February. So all of a sudden, the Celtics' already condensed schedule gets packed to a point where it's like 5 games in 7 nights, and he's just coming off of COVID, and they have to play that schedule. Kemba Walker is still just coming back off of that, the knee thing, and is not playing in a lot of those back-to-backs. So the Celtics really got hurt there. And the third thing is, this is a long haul recovery for Tatum. And he was on the Woj pod like last week or 2 weeks ago and said, I'm still not breathing entirely right. And he said that he needs an inhaler before games. And so he's only just starting to feel like his old self. That's just impossible to have a great regular season. Like the fact that the Celtics were 500 with just that alone happening. Then you factor in Kemba Walker didn't play in any of these back-to-backs and everything I just said, that now Jaylen Brown is out because he has surgery. And Marcus Smart missed significant time. Like, I hate to say it, but the Celtics, if you want to call them excuses or not, these are the things that happen. These are the reasons why the Celtics have had the season that they've had. And it brings me back to my original point. If Tatum's feeling his best now and Kemba Walker is playing like the old Kemba Walker right now, if they can get an Evan Fournier to kind of step up, and if Marcus Smart can kind of fill in whatever gaps and attack and get past that initial, defender and get into the middle of the lane, Marcus Smart driving and kicking, and these guys getting into the lane and driving and kicking. I don't know. I'm not saying that they're going to win anything. The I don't know if you know boxing at all, but I compare it to Chuck Wepner versus Muhammad Ali, where Wepner was knocked Ali down in the 9th round, one of only 4 times Ali fell in his career, and he nearly lasted all 15 rounds. And by the end, he looked like I call it a marionette handled by a drunk puppet master. But that's I think what the Celtics are at least hoping to be. Knock them down once, make their lives hell, get to the end, and by the end of the series, have people go, God, that was a fight, man. That was a fight. And you had to knock him out, and you had to go the full 15 rounds to knock them out. So that's what I'm hoping for. I understand where the Celtics are. I understand where the Nets are. The Nets are title favorites. The Celtics this is a lost season. But I don't know. Maybe they can get down a knockdown here or there. Maybe they could take 1, maybe 2 of these games. Who knows? Going to get back to the conversation with Adam in just a minute. But first, this show is brought to you by Theragun. Don't let the stress of daily life weigh on your body, whether you are an elite athlete or someone like me who sits here in front of a camera and a microphone for most of the day. Just making it through the day tension-free is tough, and Theragun can help. It is a handheld percussive therapy device. It releases your deepest muscle tension using a scientifically calibrated combo of depth, speed, and power. You might see this in use during games, players on sidelines using a device like this to work out kinks in their leg muscles. It is as quiet as an electric toothbrush, and the Gen 4 Theragun doesn't just feel good, it gets to the source of pain by releasing tension using Theragun's signature percussive therapy, which goes 60% deeper than vibration alone. Whether you want to treat your muscle tension from working out, an injury, or the stresses of everyday life, there is no substitute for the Theragun Gen 4. The OLED screen and design make you feel like you're holding something from the future. Just go to their site, check it out, and the Theragun app learns from your behaviors and suggests guided routines. Theragun is trusted by 250 professional sports teams like Real Madrid and elite athletes like Paul George, DeAndre Hopkins, Maria Sharapova, and hundreds of thousands of customers. Try Theragun for 30 days, starting at only $199. Go to Theragun.com/lockdown right now. Get your Gen 4 Theragun today. That's Theragun.com/lockdown. Theragun.com/lockdown. Hey, be sure to check me out on Locker Room. Today's show is brought to you by Locker Room. Locker Room is a kind of like a sports talk radio for your phone. Hop on into my room, get up on stage with me, talk to me. I'm doing one noon on Friday on Locker Room. So make sure you follow me at John Karalis, and we're going to talk Celtics, talk playoffs, all of that stuff. Noon at Friday. Make sure you're signed up. Use your iOS device. Beta app is on Android. So check it out. Locker Room is changing the way we talk about sports. And now let's continue talking about this series with Adam Armbrecht of the Locked On Nets podcast.
It is. Well, I think the funny thing about it is that on paper now, with the injuries, with all these things for the Celtics, you go, oh, that's a better matchup maybe than the Wizards. However, for the Nets. However, we also talk about if it's about coaching. Well, Brad Stevens is the more dangerous coach between Boston and Washington. And then if it's about the general composition of the roster, listen, can Russell Westbrook, off the season that he has, is he going to be a guy that's going to be a dog in every single fight? Of course he is. But you mentioned a guy like Marcus Smart. The interesting thing there is I wonder about all of the value, all the intangibles that he brings, and that defensive tenacity that he brings to a team this is where I think it does fall into an advantage for Brooklyn when you look at these matchups, because unlike a lot of teams, you can go out and sick Marcus Smart on Kyrie Irving,
right?
And then James Harden will take control of things. You can sick him on Harden and vice versa. And that, I think, is the other element of this matchup where you go. And by the way, I do agree with you. I think by the end of the series, it could be 4 games. And I still think that the Nets will look back at it, or, pundits will look at it and say, that was the hardest possible 4-game series, the hardest possible 5-game series, because that's what the Boston Celtics team is. But when you look at guys like Marcus Smart and what they can do for you, it is the matchup that, from a net standpoint, that says, yeah, unfortunately for you guys, we have a double down on some of these positions, on some of the matchups that make it more difficult. And then even for a player like Tatum, we're not going to shut him down, but you can throw Kevin Durant on him for a while. This is my favorite thing to do, and Doug Norrie loves it. Nicholas Claxton is going to have his little roles in early playoff series. And one of the things that's nice about his versatility is you can put him on Tatum. It doesn't mean to shut him down, but it means he can extend out and defend him to the perimeter at times. Likewise for a Blake Griffin. We all know he's not that good defensively, but he's smart. He's a veteran player, Jeff Green. So the versatility the Nets have in that way, we just get to say, Tatum, you're the best, most dangerous weapon. We're going to throw 7 different looks at you to varying degrees of failure, but it's still going to be something that we can run out there time after time, possession after possession, where the Celtics just don't have those options.
Yeah, and this is going to be the key, I think. The Celtics know that that's coming. The Celtics know that a double team, triple team, whatever different looks coming at Jayson Tatum. Tatum has to know they want to get the ball out of your hands. And you say, okay, you know what? Do it. Get the ball out of your hands, because we don't trust Brooklyn in rotation behind that. And if you get the ball out of your hands to Marcus Smart or to Kemba Walker or even Evan Fournier, all 3 guys can attack. Marcus Smart is a tremendous passer, an underrated passer. All 3 guys, if there's some kind of turbulence defensively behind that, you can get into that, and who knows, maybe you get somebody back cutting from the weak side because someone's too occupied. Okay, you double team Tatum out at the hash mark. Tatum kicks it over to the middle of the floor. You attack. Someone goes over from the weak side, and then there's your cutter. Drop it off, reverse layup, go down, set your defense. Like that type of stuff. If the Celtics, and here's the thing, that the Celtics have not done that this season. And going back to my original point, how much of what they've done this season really does apply here? If they can get past, if they can break that bad habit, if they, with that practice time, that preparation, that rest, and they just get a little bit of repetition in practice about cutting back door and understanding that this is what they want, then if you can break that defensive strategy from the Nets, what's their plan B? Do they have a plan B? Do they just go into like, well, let's just check them and get into a track meet? Yeah, screw it. Let's just. We're just.
I was going to say there isn't really the plan A defensively for the Nets isn't exactly the most concrete. So the plan B is mostly, so look, there's a bucket on the inside for Tristan Thompson. Let's head the other way and look to knock down our triples. I think you're right. There is a world, and again, where the Nets just say, yeah, we live with the results on that end of the floor. This is about, can you come chase us? I was just thinking, you mentioned Tatum and he's going to have to trust when the Nets try to get the ball out of his hands, trust his teammates. Yeah. This particular postseason, this run for the Celtics this year, this has a bit of a vibe after losing Brown, kind of like LeBron early Cleveland days, where, at a certain point in when he said, I'm going to make the right basketball play. Now everyone's going to scream, Tatum or LeBron, you got to take over these games. You got to score 50 every single night. But in order to win games, in order to win series, it's going to take more than you. It's going to take more than those kind of performances. And I think you're right. Can Tatum trust and rely on? And then can those guys behind him reward him for the trust, right? And I think Fournier becomes an interesting player. What did you see? I know he came in and then immediately went into protocol once he was brought over. So it's like just how much bad will can befall the Celtics. But
let me just tell you, not only did he come in and get into he came in, he got traded, he got a false positive. So he missed the game with health and safety protocol with a false positive, played 1 or 2 games, and then actually caught COVID. That's how screwy this season has been. I'm sorry for interrupting. What's
No, no, 100%. Yeah, it feels like, it's funny. Everyone says the different teams are going through different things, right? But I think certain teams had a much worse experience than others over the course of a second weird year for the NBA. But have you seen anything from Fournier? I mean, because it's funny, the Nets with Orlando always struggled there with how they were comprised with Vucevic and Fournier. Those were always a difficult team for the Nets historically over the last handful of years. But when you get players off of that roster and you see them other places, I sometimes I think it crystallizes it. It's like when the Nets traded away Karis LeVert, traded away Jared Allen. When I see Jared Allen now in Cleveland, I go, oh, you're just kind of an average size guy that can do some things, but you're just a guy in the NBA. When it's on your team, it's like, no, this is a cornerstone piece. Then you see him somewhere else and it feels a little diminished. Do you think you've seen better returns from Fournier as a Celtic than what you saw from afar in Orlando?
Yeah, I mean, it's been tough because he had, first of all, the COVID stuff. So he spent, like, after he came back from that, he had some really bad games. And he said he felt like he was playing with a concussion. He had that fog. He actually got a vaccination shot because he had heard that actually helps clear some of those symptoms. And so far that's been okay. I mean, what I've seen from him is not the level of Orlando, because the ball isn't in his hands the whole time. I think he hasn't had the opportunity to really fully immerse himself in this team. He's just kind of been floating along, come in, and, Kemba's starting to figure things out, and Jaylen Brown was still there. And now he's coming back and Jaylen's out. And so this goes to, practice and all of that stuff. Well, what's he going to be able to figure out? He's been more of a spot up shooter kind of guy, attack the closeouts, a high level version of that. And when he's gotten hot, I mean, he's really gotten hot. So what I'd like to see from him is more attacking, running pick and roll, driving and dishing. But I think he has a real strong opportunity to do that against Brooklyn in that scenario that I was saying before with Tatum. If you're throwing two at Tatum and you're playing 4-on-3, then Fournier has a chance to feast in that situation. And it's going to be interesting to see, where he and Kemba kind of sit. Does Fournier end up going to the corner and cutting? Is it Smart? Is it Kemba? Do they just rotate and just, hey, this is, if you're close here, you do this? And I'm very curious to see how Brad Stevens kind of runs that. But I think Fournier can be really good. I'll tell you the one guy that I think could have made this series actually interesting is Robert Williams. And that's going to be my wild card, because, I mean, you guys have known, like, he kind of Jared Allen-esque, like the hard rim roller, rim protector kind of guy that puts a lot of pressure on the defense. And if now he's got turf toe and he really aggravated it in that play-in game. So I don't know what he's going to be. If he can be anything close to his former self, 75% of himself even, then if you do blitz Tatum and Robert Williams is on the floor and you've got three other ball handlers there, then there's a potential where Robert Williams can be doing some chin-ups on the rim. And then there's going to have to be an adjustment. But Robert Williams could be the key to this series. If you don't have a healthy Robert Williams or an effective Robert Williams, then putting Tristan Thompson in there is just not going to be very effective. And to that point, I think, you tell me what you think about this. I think if Tristan Thompson plays, you put Jeff Green at center and you say, okay, Tristan, go post up Jeff Green. We want to see how that goes. And just turn Tristan Thompson into a guy who wants to feast and play back to the basket. And that takes the ball out of everybody else's hands, because he is like a big mouth bass. He will take that bait and just go with it, baby.
I think you're 100%. It can be Jeff Green. It can be Blake Griffin for stretches. It doesn't matter. That would
anything
be
that draws him into that post up game.
That would be almost the perfect scenario for the Nets, because it's funny you're mentioning Williams, and for us when we looked at it, say, boy, Tristan Thompson, is almost the prototypical matchup that you want at the 5 for the Brooklyn Nets. He's a guy that wants to be closer to the basket. Yes, he has a perimeter shot, so to speak, but he also doesn't have the ability to put the ball on the floor and take you off the dribble and drive the lane. So if he's on the perimeter, you can put a lot of different defenders out there and keep him in front of you. So there's not, he's not the athlete that you need at that position. Unlike, say, even a Williams, where the second chance opportunities, the putback plays, right, crashing the boards is where I think he would have a lot of success. So, yeah, in a world where, and this is where I wonder about Brad Stevens, I think that he'll see that and try to make the adjustment away from it as best that he can. But it feeds back into the depth piece. If Williams is struggling with injury and Tristan Thompson is in there, there's not, what's the next layer deeper? How does Boston go, quote, ultra small and try to just spread things out? Because I'll circle back to what you mentioned about Fournier, because when you talk about, say, the ball being in Tatum's hands, now if you can get Marcus Smart cutting and getting the lead feed from Tatum, driving the lane, and then it's the secondary pass off of that leaves open Fournier, because now it's the third matchup that the Nets are trying to keep their eye on. And then if they're having struggles with their switches defensively, that is where somebody's going to be in the corner. We've seen this over the course of the season. The Nets, you can find guys just standing as if it's a 6-on-5 matchup or a 5-on-4, and the Nets forgot to put in their full boat of players on defense. So there is a world where that can become a very big factor for you. I just... and I don't know why I'm trying to make a case for Boston, but I just think it's hard. It's hard to paint those scenarios where it happens for 5 minutes and then the Nets make an adjustment. Okay, now, Stevens, what are you going to adjust to off of that? Okay, Nets make another additional adjustment. At a certain point, you just don't have enough moves to make because you don't have enough pieces to make the moves that would respond to it.
Back to wrap up the conversation with Adam in just a moment. This show is also brought to you by Bet Online, the fastest and easiest way to bet on your sports action. If you believe the Celtics can upset the Nets in Game 1, then why not head over to Bet Online and check it out? Throw a couple of bucks down on it. It is, like I said, the fastest and easiest way to bet on all of your sports action. And you can also get the latest news, odds, and information. You can bet on games from around the American sports leagues, baseball, hockey, UFC, MMA, around the international sports leagues. I've seen cricket. I've seen all sorts of things on there. So you can bet on everything. Head on over on your laptop or mobile device. Use that promo code Locked On. You're going to get a 50% welcome bonus. So whatever you put in there, $100, it's a $50 welcome bonus. $200, it's a $100 welcome bonus. That 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit comes with the promo code Locked On. Don't sit on the sidelines anymore. This is your chance to get in the game. Bet Online, your online sportsbook experts. Please gamble responsibly.
If you say that Williams is a potential, could be a real potential factor in this series, does that make him kind of your dark horse player? I've seen Pritchard, flash a handful of games over the course of the year. I like young players. I mean, Is he the kind of guy that gets thrown in there and, can have some fun, even just from a Celtics fan standpoint, and they get excited to see him?
Sure. I mean, look, this is going to be, honestly, and this is your point that you were just making, this is throwing stuff up against the wall.
Right.
That's really what it is, man. This is,
and no judgments, by the way.
Look, this is
one's going to hold your feet to the fire about say, why did you try that? Because I'm trying anything.
Right. We're gonna see what works on a game to game basis, because now it's all about adjustments and all of that stuff, like you said. So you try Robert Williams. Let's say Robert Williams is not effective. So then what do? Do you go with Tristan Thompson? If Tristan Thompson is killing you with his post-ups and not moving the ball, then what do? Do you go with Grant Williams? Grant Williams has had kind of like an season. Like, he's a second-year player. At his best, he can hit those threes, and he's a strong guy. He's small, but if you're going small, then maybe that's the answer. Or maybe if you get DJ in there, you go small and you just say, all right, well, let's pull DJ out a little bit and say, you got to guard Grant Williams. You got to figure something out. And here's the difference between the two teams. Boston's adjustments are Grant Williams, right? And your adjustments are basically like, let's just play James Harden a few more minutes. Like, it's
right, yeah.
Like,
James, can you go 43 instead of 40 tonight? Thanks.
Yeah, like that's basically it. Like, let's, oh geez, I've been staggering these guys. Let's just play all three guys together for a few minutes and then let's go. So in a vacuum on 2K, there's, a potential where the Celtics can kind of keep it close and keep it, from getting out of hand. But you can't rely on the guys that I'm suggesting. Yeah, Peyton Pritchard could come in there and hit a few threes, but he's small. And the second that he's in there, if I expect the Celtics defensively to switch a bunch, they'll throw some zone out there. They'll do all sorts of different things to try to keep those guys in front. You don't want to have James Harden in the lane throwing lobs. You don't want to have him running off of pick and rolls. You've got to, that's why I think Marcus Smart's going to be all up in Harden's grill, trying to frustrate him like he has in the past. And it's going to basically be, I think, Tatum on Durant, but there's going to be a lot of switching because you just can't have those guys turning the corner. So what's Durant going to do? He's going to find Pritchard's guy and he's going to post up Peyton Pritchard and he's going to take jump shots because he won't even know that Pritchard is there. That shot, that jumper is going to come literally like 5 feet above Pritchard's head. So that's not going to be bothered at all. So yeah, Aaron Nesmith is a guy who has come in, big wing, switchable, sure, rookie who's had a very rough season up until recently. Romeo Langford, a guy who's had a completely lost season, another COVID case. He came back off of wrist surgery. The day he was supposed to come back off of wrist surgery, COVID. So he's missed the entire season. He's been a mess, but 6'4", switchable, long arms, can play good defense. What's he going to do? What are we looking for from him? These are all guys that, if they play their absolute best, might be effective for a little bit. But then at some point, Kevin Durant's going to be like, oh yeah, you're Romeo Langford. let me just drop four buckets in a row on you. And then it's like, well, we had it to 4 and now it's 12. And maybe you can cut it to 6, but it's going to be like the ocean, like the tide coming in. Like it just keeps coming and then it pulls back and it just keeps coming. And next thing you know, you're up over your head. Like I feel like that's what these games are going to be like.
Yeah. And like I say, I think the biggest thing to me is if Boston just forces the Nets to really have to earn the victories. And this is, unfortunately, from a Celtics fan standpoint, this is the Nets saying, like, how much of a speed bump are you going to be for us?
Right.
That's what we're talking about.
Well,
and if you tax us, if you make it more physical, if you get a few more minutes out of all the stars in order to earn it, then that affects us in the deeper playoff picture. And that's, by the way, that's something that I think for a Celtics team this year, you can hang your hat on that almost. Hey, we really annoyed the crap out of the Nets for 4 or 5 games. And when they're maybe struggling against the Bucks or struggling against the 76ers, we had a role in that.
Yeah,
we did a little something there. The only thing I want to ask you is about Brad Stevens. What's the state of him? I mean, has the fan base turned on him? Has he lost touch? I mean, early in the season, there was that speculation that it was kind of like he doesn't have the right personality anymore for the team. That seems odd because it's a lot of the same guys that have been there with him. I mean, I know the voice sometimes gets a little bit thin in the room after a certain amount of time, but some of it was like that he's lost the coaching acumen, which I don't think is a thing that coaches generally lose touch with.
Right. I think we've seen that when he's got better players around, suddenly he's a better coach, right? Like
Steve Nash is a really good coach.
Right. Like that's kind of how it goes. I think that Brad Stevens, like the criticism of Brad Stevens, and it's come from like a vocal minority. I don't think it's funny from my side. I see just from Twitter, which I know Twitter is not real life, but that's the only connection I have. And people are like, why does everyone in the media refuse to blame Brad Stevens? Well, maybe because we're all around these guys and we kind of see that this isn't really Brad Stevens' fault. Like, why is he playing Grant Williams so much? Who else is he going to play? Like there are a lot of things, and there's a criticism that he doesn't play the younger guys and all this other stuff. There's been all sorts of criticism. Bottom line is he hasn't had a fully healthy squad. He hasn't been able to, like, if this season was a normal season and the COVID didn't exist and they had practice time and all that stuff, who knows what this season would have been like?
Yeah.
If this season had just started in January, like they had originally said, then Kemba Walker, the original plan was for him to come back in January, which he did, but instead of being there for the start of the season, he missed like 20 games. So who knows? I don't think Brad Stevens has been any worse. you look for signs that a coach has lost his team. You look for things like, do they have any resolve to come back? And they do. They have come back from big deficits. So it's not like they're just like, you know what, forget it. I also hear these guys in the post-game Zooms. They're echoing what Brad Stevens is saying in the locker room. So if you're repeating kind of what the coach is saying, that means you're listening to what the coach is saying. So that level of kind of staying on message means that they're sticking together. So I don't think that he's lost the team. I don't think he's lost the ability to coach. I think what he has is lost the ability to have a fully healthy team to maximize what they can be. So, how many great coaches have almost been fired? I mean, Greg Popovich was almost fired, for God's sake. So, I mean, I don't know where Brad Stevens is going to stand historically. I don't know where he stands in the league right now. There are a lot of great coaches in this league, but I think he's a pretty good coach. And if the Celtics were to get rid of him, they would regret it. And another team out there would just be like salivating, like, oh my God, yes, thank you. Let's sign Brad Stevens to a multi-year deal now.
The question for another day would be, where does Danny Ainge stand in the circumstances of it all, and what role does he play in Brad Stevens' ability to have success? But that's
we'll do a whole podcast on that when the offseason comes, which might be in a couple of weeks. So
no, listen, listen, don't trust Twitter too much on this stuff, but
no.
I am looking forward to it. I'm going for, I think the gentleman's sweep makes sense here. I think the Celtics and Stevens and all things being considered earned a 500 record this year and got their way in. I think they're worth one and a couple of really tough games.
Yeah, I can see that. I might give them a second one. I think there's a Tatum game where Tatum wills them to a win. There's a potential for a Marcus Smart game in there where he just annoys the crap out of James Harden, and Harden elbows him in the face and gets a flagrant 2 and gets booted, and the whole thing goes nuts. Like something like that. Like a game in Boston where it's a full stadium. At least one of these games are going to be full capacity in Boston. In fact, game 3 is the day before full capacity, and game 4 is definitely going to be full capacity. I wonder if the state's going to be like, you know what? We're going to say full capacity as of 8 p.m. the night before to see if they can get like a full arena there. But I can see like a Kyrie overreacting to Boston fans, Smart annoying the crap out of James Harden, and just one of those, all right, you know what? Throw it away. We lost our composure type of games from Brooklyn. But that I would max out at 2. You're probably more on point with the 1 win. And then just got to hope that for the Celtics that I just want them to make Brooklyn feel them by the end of this. Like by the end, I want Brooklyn to be like, damn, we had to earn that win. However many games it takes.
Saturday cannot come soon enough.
Love it. All right. Thanks to Adam. Thanks to everybody that's been watching and listening and everything. We'll see how the Celtics do in game 1. I think this would be the one to steal if they're going to steal one. We'll figure it out. We'll talk to Adam again at some point during this series, provided that it's not a complete disaster for the Celtics. But I have hope. I have hope that things will go at least better because of their practice time and their increased familiarity. I mean, a little practice goes a long way with this team. So make sure you're subscribed if you have not to Locked On Celtics. Make sure you're listening to Locked On Nets to get their perspective throughout the series as well. Please follow the show on YouTube, subscribe to the YouTube show, share all of these links, and tell everybody to listen and watch the show. And also check out the Locked On Today podcast, where today they're talking about Steph Curry not being enough for the Warriors against the Lakers. Lakers are the 7th seed. They play the Phoenix Suns. The Warriors have to now play Memphis for the right to go up against the Utah Jazz. That's all coming up on Locked On Today. Follow the Locked On Today podcast on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts.